Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, Logan D. Irons. Logan, how are you doing today?
Good. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. I gotta say, I loved your novella. I'm a history person, teach it, love it, and it was absolutely amazing. I absolutely flew through it. So I'm really excited to, talk about the rest of your world and characters and books and get this going for you. So I'm so glad, that we were able to connect. And again, I appreciate your flexibility. You know how it is with
I do.
life
I
and
do for sure.
yeah. Anytime I say something now to somebody like, "Oh, I thought you were gonna interview that person." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a dad." They're like, "Oh, say no more." So
Yeah.
it's nice to be in the dad club. I feel like everybody just gets it. But yeah, I'm so glad to have you on today and to kind of pick your brain a little bit about, Bridge of Kings. So we'll start right there with that first one. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
So, uh, well, while I'm Logan D. Irons here, I also started writing actually in 2016 under a different pen name, Daniel Green, and so I have, and not to be confused with the YouTuber Daniel Green. I guess I have a beard, he doesn't, something like that. But anyway, I had the End Time Saga that I came out with first, which was like a zombie apocalypse series, and then that was generally 2016 through 2019, and then there's five books in that one, and then I came out with the Northern Wolf series, which is like a military historical fiction series about the American Civil War, and they kind of overlapped as far as like releasing goes. And then most recently, I started. I'm beginning. Actually, I started writing the Oaths of Blood Saga, which is under Logan D. Irons, which will be out. Actually started writing that in 2020.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
almost right when the pandemic hit, I started writing it, or I was just getting into it. So it's actually been in the works for a while. But I guess to date, I have, including Bridget Kings, I have 12 works that are out.
Oh, nice.
By the end of the year, Oaths of Blood, Sands of Bone, and City of Wolves, all three books in that Oaths of Blood saga will be released by the end of summer. They should all be out.
Well, that is a lot. A lot of people say 12 books and then they're like thinking, "Oh, it's 12 books." I'm like, yeah, that's 12 books." Like, and I always think of like a traditional publisher, right? Like you just talked about like six, maybe like 10 years worth of work there, right? Depending on like who you are, things like that. So yeah, that's like quite a bit of backlog, which is pretty awesome. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's cool. I totally forget about your Northern Wolf series too, so I have to go back and to add those too. I added some of the other ones on my Kindle recently, so I have to go back and do that. I knew I was forgetting something, so I had to go back
Yeah.
and do that. But in terms of genres, so what genre or genres do you currently write in and why?
Well, obviously I just listed off three relatively different genres.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The historical fiction, historical fantasy, actually, they overlap quite a bit. Because I was a history major in college. Go green, and and we um, I that's always been an interest of mine. Even as like a kid, I was having my parents drag. I would drag my parents on like vacations. I'd be like, "Let's go to Gettysburg for our family vacation." So I
There you
would
go.
like make them take me to all these different places. And so it's always been, especially the Civil War, has always been, just because it's in our backyard. And now I live in Virginia, so it really
Oh
is my
wow.
backyard.
Literally, yeah.
Really, I go all over. Like Manassas used to be about like 20 minutes from where I used to live in
Oh
Virginia,
wow.
Northern Virginia here. I mean, you could go run the battlefield. It's just, just a really, it's just so much history here. So
Yeah.
as a historical fiction and a historical fantasy writer, like I love it. But it's, my interest has always been more than that, though, more than just the American history. Um, I've like to dive into further history, further back, the medieval period, especially the Crusades, which is what the Oaths of Blood saga takes place during the first, in between the second and third Crusades, and then the fourth
Oh,
Crusade. So that kind of runs a gambit. It also, it's not just historical. I like to think of that series as more of like a secret history, and so it's
yeah.
it's to me, doing the historical fantasy is a lot of fun because I can play within the historical realm, but I can bring fantastical elements into it. I can bring myths and legends into it and kind of give you like a secret history. And so sometimes when I talk about my series, I throw like, oh, it's a mix between Assassin's Creed and
Mhm.
The Last Kingdom and Underworld all mixed into one. And so like when I say Assassin's Creed, I mean that kind of like secret history, that
Yeah,
secret war that's going on, not necessarily the alien technology kind of bit, but like it's like this secret war that's going on in the background between all these other conflicts. And like that's what I like to think that like there's this other secret history that maybe like is that took place that we all think it's written this way, and I actually comment on it in every book. There's probably a few comments where they're like, that's not really how that happened, or the guy who wrote the history is totally wrong, it was like this, that guy wasn't a hero, that guy was a coward, and
yeah,
it's just fun to be able to play within that historical context, because that's always been a passion of mine, but then to bring in all these different, the Oaths of Blood saga also has and you probably didn't it's not in Bridge of Kings, doesn't have much of that, but it's actually Arthur. There's a lot of Arthurian based things
oh, cool.
within the series. Um, so like it's nice to be able to bring in some of those different like myths and legends and let those play out within this, secret history that you've created.
I I totally agree, and like being a historian and history teacher, um, like Arthur's always been really interesting to me, but I always wonder what happened after his death. So I always want to write like a series about that, and about this how amazing he was. But you got to think, right? Like even for the time, he had to have been huge, right? And to be the men that are left over, like I always think, like, what do you do? Like could have been some of the other knights, could have been whoever. So
Mhm.
yeah, to me, it's like that secret. That's a good way to put it, like secret history. Yeah, there's always just so many interesting things, like we talked before we got recording. There's just so many cool things where you're like, there's questions that I love, historical mysteries, and I love to write about those, and like we talked, like coming up with your own spin on it, but still using the history, and
Yeah.
it's just
It,
fun. Like that's just the way to put it. It's just fun.
I think it also makes history, like it makes it history to me. If history is fun, right? But it also
Yeah,
makes
yeah,
it makes it more approachable for a lot of people,
it's a good
because
word. Yeah,
you created a kind of a fantastical spin on it. And you're like, wow, you know, look at this. Wow, that was really cool. And then you read if you read the historical note at the end, you're like, wow, a lot of that was real. Like a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
the battles that I write about are actually real, and they're kind of how they went down, or mostly how they went down. So it
yeah.
adds, I think it makes it approachable for a lot of people too that maybe aren't interested in it, and maybe
Oh,
some curiosity. I know I get emails pretty frequently with the Northern Wolf series, which is is fiction. It's not fantasy, but people really enjoy the historical note section because they're like, wow, I didn't know XYZ happened. I didn't know these things, or that it's really interesting. You made that history more interesting for me. You brought me
yeah,
into
yeah,
it. And being able to do that for people too, and to share my passion, or our passion, and to be
yeah,
able to bring that people together like that maybe wouldn't normally
yeah,
um, jump into the Crusades history.
yeah,
Uh, but if you do like it, then it's like you're gonna love it, right? If you
yeah.
do like history, you're gonna love it. But even if you're on the fence about history, like it's enough of a world build where I think that regular fantasy readers will enjoy it. You would enjoy it as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree, especially with Bridget Kings, which we'll talk about a little bit more here in just a sec. I do agree with you though. Like, um, yeah, there's just so many cool like jumping off points. Like, well, like I would say with Bridget Kings, like like again, like I went in thinking it would probably be a little bit more history, like overall. And then I totally got your blurb mixed up with somebody else's. So I just went in, I was like, oh man, I'm like ready, and the cover got me ready for just like the battle. And when I originally read it, I was like, oh, I remember this. So I actually looked up the battle again before we got recorded, like we were talking about. So I was just like ready. And then I got into it and I got to a certain point where the stuff happens with the fantastical elements. And I was like, oh my, but I was like, so I forgot because I was just like, so the historical fiction person in me was like, oh, this is awesome. And, the person that just loves the description of battles and even just like the setup of that battle with the troops moving everything. And I mean, it was just such a good story overall. And like I said before we got recording, like, it's like you didn't waste a word at all, particularly getting stuff going. And it was just awesome. And then once that moment hit me, I mean, it hit me like a tidal wave, which I think was really cool. So yeah, it was just like awesome. And then I kind of had to set it down with my son, and then I was thinking to myself, so I went back and read the blurb, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the one. Because I tried starting originally, and he wasn't having it a couple weeks ago. So I got it in when I could. But yeah, it was just so cool because it was just like a pleasant surprise, I guess. Because I love both aspects, and sides of it, both the history and the fantastical elements. Yeah, so it was really awesome. But yeah, I thought it was really neat. I thought it was a great way to insert history and those fantasy elements. I would say it was very similar for me on how Patricia Briggs does it really seamlessly, and Kevin Hearn. So if anybody, has read those two authors, I felt like you did a really great job just combining the history aspects and the fantasy as well. So it was really awesome.
Thank you.
And we will get going here with our next question. So what is your I'm sorry, what is your novella Bridge of Kings about, and your Oath of Blood saga? And how did you come up with this idea?
So Bridge of Kings is it's prequel no it's like a prequel novella for Oaths of Blood, the Oaths of Blood saga. So it actually takes place in 1066, and focus on the Battle of Stamford Bridge, which for if people are into history or whatever medieval history, 1066 is a big year for in particular English history, and but mostly because of the Battle of Hastings is what people think about, which is
And
William the Conqueror, and the Normans come in and they basically change the ruling dynasty in England. Well, before before that, there was the Battle of Stamford Bridge, and this was another king. His name was Harold Hardrada, and he was a Norse king, and he sailed over with an army, and the English had to fight him first, which probably is why they lost at Hastings, is because
yeah,
they
yeah,
had to fight in a huge battle. I don't know what the timeline was, but like 3 weeks before they fought William the
yeah,
Conqueror,
yeah. Yep,
it's something like that.
yeah.
Don't hold me to the coals on
It
that one, but
was relatively close though,
but
yeah.
it was close enough where like if you lose let's say you have 7,000 guys in your army and you lose 3,000 of them in one battle, like you've already greatly diminished your fighting force to go fight a bunch of other guys who utilize cavalry better and things like that. Like you're talking about it's sufficiently diminished. Anyway, the Battle of Stamford Bridge is before that, or is before Hastings, and so and the English win that. And but there's a real famous, and it's when you read about it, it's like a sentence. They're like
Yep.
a Norse berserker held the English at this bridge because they surprised the Norse army or the Vikings, and they also kind of historians kind of consider it the last Viking. Like Harold Hardrada was like one of the last Viking
Yeah.
kings per se, and they kind of like close off the end of the Viking era at that point. And so this was a major defeat for them, in that aspect as well. But anyway, a berserker holds the English army at bay while the Norse, come to arms and they get ready to fight. And that's like one sentence. And like people
Yeah.
speculate, all different things, but like he held these guys at this bridge. And I mean, first of all, what an epic, I mean, what an epic way to go. What an epic story. Like you should be,
Particularly for a Viking,
somebody
yeah.
should write a story about this guy. Like he probably
Yeah.
deserves it, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
maybe he's not a hero depending on which side you liked, but like he's he's definitely heroic in the fact that he was able to defend in melee combat. And I like to pick the long axe because I like axes. Who knows? Maybe he had a sword, or
Yeah,
like who knows? But like he is able to do that for so long while his whole army rallied behind him. And I know we were talking about this a little bit, but like they said like he killed like 40 or 50 guys or something, and you're like,
crazy.
geez, like I mean you can be good, but like I mean that's like some Achilles kind of stuff, you know what I mean?
It really is. Yeah.
Actually he
Yep.
gets that and I don't in my story he gets jabbed in the foot, but like in the historical chronicle they talk about somebody had to sneak underneath, and this is subject to debate too. Like it could be
Mhm.
just somebody saying they had to do something sneaky to defeat this berserker, right? They
Yeah, yeah,
snuck
yeah.
underneath the bridge and jabbed a spear into his foot, they said, to bring him down. Some people speculate that maybe they jabbed it into his groin, to bring him down. But like they're just saying that like they had a hard time, they had to sneak in order to bring this guy down.
Yeah, yeah, which is
So
impressive.
that was kind of like, I was like, I gotta write something about this. Like
Yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
so I, one of the characters from my Oaths of Blood saga is this character. His name's Ulf Bodvarsson, and so this is kind of like a backstory for him, and about how he meets another one of the characters, and so it's a good intro into the universe. And
Yeah.
then fast forward to 1099, and now we have book one, and book one actually focuses on a different character. His name's Robert Cutnose, and he's a Norman mercenary. I use that term loosely for back then, but for all purposes, he's a mercenary. And at the first, he's at the in the first crusade, or what they call the Princess Crusade at the time. He um, is at the sack of Jerusalem, and that
Mm.
kind of starts off. So
That's it.
that also starts off as in a very historical flavor until things start to ramp up out of control, kind of. So the Oaths of Blood saga, yeah, like I said, it's kind of a secret history. It actually focuses. Robert Cutnose is kind of stuck between two factions of people that are vying for control over like a relic they call the Black Chalice,
Mm.
and they're fighting an ancient war. These two factions. It's called the Order, which is an order of knights, loosely based on, or not, I mean, slightly based on like Arthurian knights, and they are uh, in war, or in a like eternal war, so to speak, with another faction they call the Hunted, and that
Mm.
faction is very loose based. Like they're more likely to fight each other than they are. They're not organized. They're just in more individual or in small groups. So,
Gotcha.
I call it the Noctis Bellum, is like this shadow war, this night war between these two factions. That's kind of this eternal war, and our main character for the Oaths of Blood saga is actually Robert Cutnose, and he gets drawn into this conflict, and has to pick a side basically.
It just sounds awesome. It's like right up my alley because I mean, as you know, I got, my novella and stuff and what Nathaniel and my Monster Hunter, and there's just so many similarities between like what I want to do with the world, and like kind of the same thing like Secret History, and your books. So it's just really cool to see how somebody else does something. And that's like James and I were just talking with one of my dark fantasies is, like seeing something with that just that natural cultural diffusion, right? Like there's I think I'm so sorry I messaged you late that night when I finished your book. I realized that it was probably a little bit later. I was like, oh man, hope his ringer isn't on or something. So I did message, you right away. I was like, oh, I need the next one. Like, when's the next one coming out? Because I was just
Listen,
like, I absolutely flew through the novella. So
if you like my stuff, anybody reach out anytime and tell me. Like, it doesn't matter what time it is. Like, it's nice to those are I call that like author fuel. When
yeah, yep,
people reaching out saying, "Hey, I really loved your work," or like it really moved me, or like it made me want to read some, read, into history more, like all that stuff like that, or some sort in some way it's inspiring. Like that is author fuel. That keeps you. Those are the ones. Those reviews or that feedback, or are what keep you, your butt in the chair, fingers on the
yeah, yeah.
keyboard.
No,
Um,
totally.
keeps you going, because you're always going to have people, and we're kind of drifting probably into other questions, but you're always going to have
Oh,
people
it's
maybe
totally
like,
fine. Yeah,
well,
we'll meander. That's fine.
yeah. I mean, you always people that aren't going to like your stuff. There's too much history, or there's too much
Totally.
war, or whatever. Like, and that's okay. Like I write, there's always going to be people that don't like it, so you're going to have to always understand that when you come out with something,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's okay too. Like everybody's got other stuff I don't like, that other people
yeah,
like. So like it's just, I write the things I like, and I particularly like, a more military or war fan, military fiction, or I like war, war fantasy, or, and that's not really a genre, but you know what I mean. I like
yeah,
that. I
yeah,
like having that
yeah,
as a central conflict in my work. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
like to have a strong um, global, like external conflict, while my characters are operating in this other conflict too.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, speaking of author fuel, just so you know, so after I got done with Bridge of Kings, it got me going, and I ended up creating a whole new character for novella two for Nathaniel, like an old army buddy, or sorry, military buddy, and I haven't specified which branch, but he was like kind of like a mentor. because I was missing something for the outline and the story when I had written it before, and I was like, oh, it's after I read Bridge of Kings, and with your two main characters with that relationship, I thought, oh, he could probably just use somebody. So it's totally different context, right? But that helped me, and then I actually had another character that was going to be a minor character who now is going to be a full character. But that also really came from their relationship towards the end of the book. So yeah, so it was really cool. So I will once I get that fully done, I'll point them out to you for novella too. But yeah, it definitely
Sure.
helped me popcorn, which it's just always to me just the coolest thing of reading somebody's work or even just talking to about how you came up with your stuff. I think it's so cool. I think it's funny. People are like, well, this is so similar to this. I'm like, yeah, but I always want to like have two people like you and me come with a topic and write a short story, but the same topic, right? And like the same character and same line, and just to then come together and have people read them, because they're going to be so different. And I just
Yeah.
think that's what makes writing so cool. And then we look how many people, probably, done, these types of battles before, but then you came up with something, so unique. And I just thought it was cool because I do remember when I first read that story, I thought, I want to know what the Berserker did. I want to know who he was. And I remember specifically thinking that at the time when I learned that. And then my teacher was talking about the English so much because she had a fake British accent, and that's like what she wanted was to be British. But I remember sitting my butt in that class thinking, like, I want to know who this person is. And I'm a martial artist, so I'm like, how on earth do you take on like an army essentially, even on a narrow bridge by yourself? Like that, to me, that's absolutely crazy to think about. So it's just so serendipitous that you ended up doing that. And it kind of blew my mind. And it got me thinking about some other, different historical points like that that would make really cool
Yeah.
stories. So I think
Yeah,
that's
and
awesome.
that's something too is like, I'm constantly jotting down ideas. If I come across something, I'm like, hey, that's interesting, and I kind of maybe go down like a rabbit hole, and I'm like, okay, like this is an interesting top. That's a good story, or that historical character is actually a really good character, right?
Yeah.
So any kind of fiction or even just something that's focused around that time, like different battles, different
Yep.
people. I'm like, man, like that guy's got a wild story. Like no one believes. Like in one of my historical fiction series, the one of the characters in the Civil War one of the real life people who the person who killed John Wilkes Booth,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
his story is absolutely in like you'd be like, no way, you made that up. You made that up. He was like a
Interesting.
really religious guy. Not to be graphic, but they the story what they have written down about him is that he was, I mean, he was a carpenter sometimes, but then he's kind of a drifter. But basically, a prostitute solicited him on the street. This is 1800s now. We're not talking about
Yeah, yeah.
Oaths of Blood, but like anyway, he self castrated himself and then went to church to
Interesting.
pray about it after he was solicited by prostitutes. And then this guy like joined the army. He was captured. He was like in like this guy's story. And then he killed John Wilkes, and he was just so happened to be the guy who killed John Wilkes Booth. And then after the war, he went out west, and they put him in an insane asylum at some point because he drew a gun
Wow.
on someone. And then then like he escaped and they just disappeared. They don't know. Like I don't know.
Wow.
If I would have wrote
That's
that guy,
crazy.
oh yeah, he self castrated himself, and you're like, what? What? Why did you do? Like you would never. People would be like implausible. Doesn't
Yeah, yeah,
maybe
yeah, yeah.
would be like no
History is
way.
stranger than fiction, right?
I'm
It's
like,
totally
no, this
true.
guy's real. Like that guy
Yeah,
is the real guy. His name's
that's crazy.
Boston or Corbett, maybe something like that.
I totally know who you're talking about. I didn't realize he was like his life was that interesting though. I always find it interesting. I know we're doing history stuff, but it's hard with history buffs to I always find it interesting at the time when I always talk to my students about is like John Wilkes Booth was the only criminal at that time who was quote unquote shot in the face, and they couldn't parade him around the country like they used to for all the famous criminals. And I'm like, so the most famous assassin or criminal ever, and he's the only one that you didn't parade around. Now, they did other people that, had stuff
Mm.
happen to. And some of the pictures where he was shot in the face were just so interesting. So I always find it interesting with that one. And my friend actually was writing a story about how John Wilkes Booth got away and different things. And it was just, that he was doing a lot of research. He brought me some interesting stuff. And he's like, you like historical mysteries? I said, But he brought that to me, and I actually did the research. And all the other criminals, they did that. They would, like they took Lincoln on the train. They would literally parade the criminals around, and people would literally take pictures with them. And they would literally like preserve their bodies so people could take pictures with them. They'd raise money for families and stuff. And it's crazy that he's the only one. And you think he'd be the one that the most people would want to see. So I don't know. There was other stuff where I was like, that detail always really interested me. So anything about the people surrounding that barn and stuff to me
Yeah,
would be really cool. So now I'm gonna have to look that guy up.
yeah. That's at the assassination and then the hunt for John Wilkes Booth is
Yeah.
the premise for the fifth book in that series, which is the
Oh, that's so
final book in that
cool.
series. Yeah, so it's all about the Knights of the Golden Circle and John
That's
Wilkes
cool.
Booth and the other conspirators
Oh, that's
and then
cool.
obviously we have our fictional characters that are all muddled up in there. So
I just blew. It sounds to me like I just blew my Kindle money for May already. So
yeah, yeah, that's a good one because the rest of the series is a lot about like war and like battles and army movements, and that one's kind of there's these guys that kind of get shoved into doing this mission that they're not that's not their normal thing that they do. It's not
that's
war per
cool.
se, it's more of detective work. So
Yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of like their end of war story, so to speak.
Oh,
And
that's so
it's a
cool.
really I felt like it was a really good round, like really good, nice full circle ending for the characters that go all the way through from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like kind of like that sounds cool. It sounds like kind of like I love that idea with Henry Cavill and Jack Reacher, Alan, where was it Ungently Warfare or something like that? I heard
Oh
it
yeah.
was like a Mission Impossible, but kind of quirky. And I like stuff like that, where you take like a different time period that we don't always see, and then kind of do something like that. I just always think it's cool to. It's kind of like fantasy, right? Some people, might pick Industrial Revolution, like Crystal Matar, Gaslamp Fantasy, but historical fiction too. I think is cool to do that kind of thing. Like I would love to, see some more stuff like that. That's what I was saying before we got recording. I want my Roman stuff to be like that with my little unit, and they're already used to working together, and they have to combat these Mission Impossible like odds, and but to see how they did it in a historical setting, versus supernatural creatures or whoever, just in general, even just humans, right? I think is interesting. So even like you're saying, like the detective work, I think would be really cool, to see how they handle it during that time period. That's really neat. Yeah, cool. Well, that's awesome. Well, now I have a lot to do later because I had the night off, but now I got to look up,
Yeah,
a lot of
I
John
think you
Wilkes
enjoy
Booth
it.
and detective stuff at the time.
Yeah,
Was it one of my
yeah.
friends did
Here's
like a
five
thief
books.
break?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of my friends did like a thief taker or something like that, and I was like, God, that sounds really cool. And then I had to change one of my books to accommodate the historical aspect that he had, and I put it into my fantasy setting, and then it brought my setting up like almost probably I would say like 200 years or something to more of like a not medieval, but like like the 1700s kind of thing. So I just thought it was like so interesting. I told him, I was like, you just ruined my book. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, I had to like move everything up now because of this one guy based off this research that you gave me, this one article on these thief takers. So maybe I'll have to do something Civil War-esque like in a fantasy setting. But that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean,
Um, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just thinking, I was like, yeah, there you don't see much. I think probably because it's it can still be a sensitive topic for a lot of people, so you don't
That's true, yeah.
see that kind of stuff as much. But they did Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, and that was a
That's
good
so good.
matchup between the supernatural and the
It
history.
really
It
was.
was fun. It was fun. Some people didn't, I don't think, like the movie, but I think the book did really well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, even the end though, I wanted another movie, and I don't know if there was another book. There might have been, but I loved where they went to spoilers, but it was like what, 17 years ago.
Mhm.
But they they had the end of the movie, Lincoln wasn't around, right? But like some of the other characters were at the end, and then modern day, and I'm like, that just sounds cool. So that idea, I'm glad you brought that up because that stuck with me. So like I have historical urban fantasy stuff set in my urban fantasy world, where I'm gonna be right. So my Roman soldiers actually ran into people and organizations from who Nathaniel will meet. So maybe not everybody, but some of the people are still around from those times, and they'll have some common characters and stuff like that. But I just always thought it was actually from that movie in particular. I thought man, that's just they did such a good job, I think. And I was like, it's a shame that they didn't, I always want to see the continuation in modern day, I guess. And then kind of going back to, maybe like one of Abraham Lincoln's descendants or something like that. I don't know. I just always that left me wondering and wanting more, which I guess the writer in me was like, all right, let's do this thing, and started to kind of think and start to pound some keys. But yeah, that's a really good one. I felt like there wasn't really a genre, like urban fantasy is one thing, and they have people that were around or things that were around, or but I find it hard to find books like yours, where they're actually set in those time periods. It's always flashbacks for a couple of chapters,
Yeah.
but I want books set in those time periods with those characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and when I wrote Oaths of Blood, right now it's just three, but this is a little bit of craft stuff. But before I even wrote the first three, or while I was writing the first three, usually I outline several others just to
makes sense.
prepare, with foreshadowing or Easter eggs within the series. I can make sure that they can kind of play off each other. And
Yeah,
so I always outline quite a few. And so, with the Oaths of Blood series, I have, if people like it and they buy it, I will write more of them.
yeah,
Because I have actually quite a few plotted out, and different adventures for different sub characters, future, past, from that time period. So I have like just
well, that's cool.
like a long sheet of like ideas that surround that universe that I'm ready to jump into. It's really, sometimes it's just a matter of being like, God, which one are we gonna do? Like, which one do we do
Yeah,
next? Like, I
yep,
don't like there's so many, like, which one do you think will resonate? Which one do people want to have? Do they like these characters, or should I bring in a new character?
yep,
Right. And so like that might be maybe a challenge, you know, not necessarily for like a brand new author, but like, as an author that has come out with a few things now. Like that is a challenge, is like, what is the next project? Do you continue your
yep,
current ones? Because people ask if I'm going to write more of the historical fiction. They're like, "Hey, is Wolf coming back?" And I'm like, "I don't know, not right now." But like, I also have tons of stuff plotted for that series too that I could have jumped into. So it's always kind of picking the next project, because it's like making it. You're making a commitment, right? As soon as
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
jump in,
yep,
I'm committing to. If it's a series longer than a year of my life, I'm going to
yep,
be sitting in this office right here, or whatever, on the airplane, and I'm going to be hammering keys in this universe. So you better like it, and you better hope that like it's meeting people's expectations, and you think you can sell it. It has opportunity to
yeah,
be
yeah,
sold. So like there's a lot of that where I'm constantly like rearranging. Okay, do I do this one first and
yep,
then that one, or this, and that kind of, it's just an element on it that, when you've come out with one, you're like, oh, that's great. I have a book. That's, look, read this. And then, I have two in the series, or I have three. And it's just, all of a sudden you're like, okay, like, what are you going to, because life is finite. And so you got to you try to spend your time wisely, and you don't want to waste time on a project that maybe people wouldn't like, or, like, maybe you don't like, like,
yeah,
because people fall into like, well, this is what is popular right now, and blah blah blah. I'm gonna write that, and like, that's okay. It's your life. You can do whatever you want. You can write whatever you
yeah.
want. But like, I always like to write. I like to write stuff that I'm passionate about, or I really think is interesting, and like, I
Close to
can
the page
I
that
gotta
way.
feel it, right? I gotta feel that, like, in your gut. You gotta feel it, because if
Yep,
you're gonna spend a year and a half doing this stuff on whatever, one or two books, or
yep,
generally speaking, I can do. And there's some people out there that are incredible, and more power to you if you write fast. I think I write fast. I've been told I write fast, but I really only do probably two books a year, is generally my how I do it.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I don't. I've done more, but usually that's because I've either stockpiled, or I've built up.
yeah,
I've gotten them far enough along where I could just finish them and come out with
yeah,
them. But it's like this series, for example. I've been working on it since 2020. It's not the only thing I worked on in 2020. I wrote three other books in the Northern Wolf series, and I wrote these three in the novella. It's like there's other stuff I've worked on, and like, it's not the only thing I was working on. That's the thing, is for authors today, like, you're never only working on one project,
yeah, yeah.
right? Like, you're
Yep,
always, you're either rough draft rough draft, you're working on that one, and then
Outlining.
there's always one stockpile. They're always, they're always on
Yep.
top of each other. So like right now, I've I'm like one day away from finishing the. I was hoping it would be on Friday, so I could tell you the second book in that series is all the way complete, ready to go to audio production. But it's not. I have one more day left to work on that, and then that one's completely done. I'm final. I'm done looking at it, and I think that's something too that people miss sometimes, or that it's hard when you're first starting out is being done, being like, okay, like this is what it's going to be. No matter,
Yep.
I can rewrite it as many times as I want, and I can make tweaks, I can change these things, but at some point you're going to have to release your book baby into the wild and be like, hopefully I've taught you enough to make people good decisions,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that kind of stuff. So
Like a
you
parent.
it's that can be hard, is letting go of that and be like, that is what it is, I'm on to the next project. And but it's, you got to have your tough skin with it, but at some point you're going to have to let it go, otherwise you're writing, but like you're not publishing, and publishing is a critical component of being a writer or being an author today, is you got to come out with stuff, because people will forget about you if you don't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind, right?
yeah.
That's what this podcast, like I tell my wife, I'm like, I need to keep going. And so instead of losing my viewership, like when we had our son and stuff, like I was trying to do things, but it was like to have to come back up to the algorithm. Then YouTube changed stuff, TikTok changed stuff, X or whatever, Twitter changed algorithms. So I told her, I was like, people ask me about reviews, and I'm like, you like your book and stuff, your novella. So and book one, I'm like, yep, I'm gonna do them. I'm like, but I'm waiting till right after my season's done so I can release, at least 2 5-minute reviews every week. And I've done it in a format that's quick and efficient, tells people what I loved about your novella, and what I'm looking for, what they should be expecting, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, you have to keep going. I mean, I feel like publishing is even more, because it's not an algorithm, it's people, and obviously there's people that have not finished things and they're starting to probably lose fans, or who will just be frustrated with things, right? So you have to, and like you said, manage your time, right? That's me. People are like, well, I thought you were going to do this. And I'm like, well, I still have those things. I'm like, but financial stuff hit, and I'm like, I got to go with my novellas. They're shorter and easier and cheaper and, stuff like that. I'm like, I'm still publishing this year, but I had to flip stuff. I was hoping to have book one done for Nathaniel. He stopped talking to me about what was going on and then wanted to go 2 years earlier. I don't know. And I'm like, well, I got to go with, what I can get done and printed. So I'm like 3 novellas within, really like 6 or 8 months releasing from one another gives me an extra time starting right in September, right? And then I can get some other stuff done over the summer. I'll have hopefully book one done. If not, I'll have this other dark fantasy and I can kind of, go that way. But I agree with you. It's like I was talking to a teacher the other day, that I know. I'm like, you just got to do what's best for you, and it's no offense to kids or organizations or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's what's best for you and your family. And I feel like authors, it's the same way, right? Like whatever, you can get done in a timely manner that you feel is best for you. I always respect people if they're like, hey, I'm gonna have to come back to this later. I'm like, there's plenty of other stuff to read. You're not gonna lose me as a fan, you just I'm gonna keep coming back to you, to kind of see where stuff is. So particularly after sold me, on Bridge of Kings so well, and I think again it goes towards writing is your best selling point,
Yeah,
so
and it's
which I think is important.
always about putting your best foot forward,
Yep,
whatever, your best foot forward, whatever that book is at the time,
yep,
and just then doing it again and again. And it's just kind of, you just keep doing it until hopefully people pay attention.
yep, yep. Oh,
That's hard. I mean,
yeah,
it's hard, and you gotta try to meet people and network, and all that kind of stuff. So that it's not just writing. If it was just writing, it would be different. You could probably
yep,
go a little faster, but
yep,
then there's the overall length of novels.
yeah, yeah,
Like, my the fantasy ones I've written so far, it was like the first one was 115,000, the second one was 160,000 words. So like in reality, that's like that's like two novels.
really is.
I mean,
Yep,
80,000 words is maybe not for fantasy, but for general fiction, at 80,000 to 90, 70 to 90 is probably pretty normal.
yep,
Maybe 70 to 100. If it's
yep,
a long, 100 would probably be long. 100,000 words. So, I mean, and you're talking 160. I mean, that's two books. I mean, so in actuality, maybe I could write, maybe I could write faster
Yeah.
if I was cutting them in half. And so there's always that dilemma too, is like, how long should you make it? Is, you know, and like there's audio, there's audio concerns with that too, because
Yep.
people, audio listeners prefer longer content.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so like there's just, you know, there's a lot of things to take into consideration. But at the end of the day, like you're saying, it's, you just got to be doing what's best for you. And if it's novellas right now, that's what keeps you going and keeps you having output, then it's novellas, right? You
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
knock them out, you know.
Yep. Well, I have to say, just because it occurred to me, I just want to mention to people who might be in a similar situation to me, because I right now it's like I'm doing like half novellas. I had some art people, like yours, and I love novellas. I always have. Like I've read so many great ones. I love them. And but I was reading yours, and I was like, oh, is mine ready? Is it gonna be ready? And you're gonna have that question. And I just thought to myself, I went back. I was like, well, you've written a lot more books than I have. I was like, it's going to be just totally different. And I just wanted to point out to people that you're going to have those fears, those doubts, whatever. But at the end of the day, I just keep thinking to myself, there, even after my editor's done, alpha, beta, the only way I'm ever going to get better is by, like, we said, you got to put that book out there. You got to put that product out there, to get that feedback and to learn from, and there's many things that I was talking to Michael R. Fletcher. Mike's like, yeah, there's so many things I wish I had done differently, like Beyond Redemption, or pick a book, right? He's like, just pick a book. I wish I had done X, Y, and Z. And I just heard him say on their podcast, with him and Kristen Matar, that like he loves Anna Smith Spark. So do I. When I read her books, I'm like, oh my God, am I ever gonna 90 years, right? Writing every day, I probably couldn't do what she does. Can only attempt, but he said the same thing. So I thought that was interesting, and I would love to write something as good as Mike has written, so I just want to throw that out there, because I was thinking with yours, I was like, oh, maybe I should redo this or that. And I'm like, no, I'm like, it's just the newbie in me, and there are some things I want to fix though, for sure. Cause like I said, you didn't waste a word, and it was just like so tight. And the pace was amazing. And I want a similar pace to yours, where you're just like in it, and then you get done, you're like, dang, that was really good. I need the next one, or the next product. So I just thought that was really good. So that's something that actually made me want to get mine out there a lot sooner. But there were some things that flowed through my head, so I could totally see, where most people, kind of could falter there. So I just wanted to point that out, like you were saying, like just keep going. I always think keep moving forward. That's just,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just has been stuck in my head since the pandemic. I tell my students, I'm like, are what we doing it as a class or as you as an individual? Is it, keeping you moving forward? And Les Brown, I forget who he read, but it's a great quote, like inch by inch, anything is a cinch. And I always just try, and even if it's, 5, 10 words, or 5, 10 minutes of writing, any progress to me is forward progress. So I think that's a great advice that you
Yeah.
gave. So
Yeah. I
that's
mean, you
awesome.
gotta, I think it's good to be intentional with what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because like you don't want to waste that time,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you also like, you can find practice, or you can find like anything you're doing, reading a book, researching. I mean, that's essentially you're doing, in digesting content is helping you understand craft, you're understanding
Yeah.
character, plot, all those different, all of that. Anytime, even if it's um, like video or television,
Yeah.
movies or television, like you're,
I know what you meant.
yeah, I'm like video. What am I like 80 years old? You and your VHS. But uh, but like anytime you're ingesting content, like I try to look at it through my author, like, okay, like here, where's the
Yeah.
hook? Where's the inciting incident? Where are my turning points in that novel, or in the novel, or in the film? And I think that helps you understand, helps you understand those for your own work. And
Yeah.
I that's, so I mean, even that would consider not research. You're not practicing, but you're learning from somebody else's stuff. And I think
Yeah.
that's how everybody starts. You're
Yeah.
learning. You've learned what a story looks like from all this content that you've digested. Full length content. I'm not talking about like TikTok, but
Well, I just
by
want
the
to
way,
point
I'm
that out.
terrible at TikTok. I'm on there. I think I make some funny stuff, but like I uh
Oh, it's an art
I'm not
form.
good
I'm
at it.
trying to study from some of my kids, but to get better at it. But I just want to mention because you brought up such a great point. Because I was like almost to the point of depressed when I wasn't able to write my what like with my the birth of my son. He had a lot of stuff pop up during my wife did after. It just like I was just full-time dad, and I was working. Stuff got rearranged, so I wasn't able to write. But I just want to point out something you said because I think it would help people to get through it like me. And even though I wasn't able to write as much until things had settled, I do what's called character studies. And it could be like Roku was free for the first like 4 seasons of Walker, Texas Ranger. God, I love that show. So, but I haven't seen it since I was younger, right? So I was watching it and I just never realized how complex a character like Cordell Walker is. Like he's half Native American, and he was in Vietnam, has PTSD from it. He was like special forces. I mean, that just he had a fiance that was killed. I mean, just so many things that as a kid or a teenager I skipped over. I just wanted the kicking and punching, right? Or the cool action scenes. But I never realized as until I became a writer, right? How complex a character he is. And I always look at the Mummy for a story, right? I mean, Brendan
I
Fraser,
love that
you know
movie.
what I'm saying? Like just like what a perfect movie, like perfect story, right?
Yeah.
Um, and minus a few parts, I really liked the second one. But it just that movie was perfect, perfectly written, acted, the characters are great. It gave you such a great world. There was another one I did a few years ago too. Oh, Mr. Miyagi's one. I just went through and just was rewatching everything from Mr. Miyagi's standpoint. He's like my favorite character of anything. And there's a couple others too where Mal, Nathan Fillion's character from Firefly. I was just trying to figure out like why I liked him so much, and why everybody did, or just in general, like with the crew and stuff and their relationships, interactions. So I don't know. Now I just call them character studies, but even if I'm taking a break watching something like you said, I'm doing some work,
Yeah,
and I'm trying to make myself better creatively.
yeah, I think you sit back and you're like, yeah, why does that person speak to me? Or
Yep.
why am I enjoying, like, why am I like, head deep into this show? Like
Yep.
why is that? And I think, and then and like reverse analyzing, okay, what is,
Yep.
or reverse engineering, why did I get sucked into this, you know, um this content, and then trying to apply that to your, to your own craft. And
Yeah.
obviously, you don't copy what they're doing, but like, because you're never really copying it, even if you tried to take their thing and make it like your thing, it's still your, at the end of the day, it's still yours, and it's probably not,
Yeah.
when you're first learning, it's probably not very good either. Like there's always stuff, like you were saying earlier. I think you said, that was it Fletcher that was saying that, like
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking
always
about
stuff
Anna
I
Smith
want to
Spark.
change.
Yep.
And always stuff I look back and I'm like, man, like I I didn't do that character very well, and I wish I would have. But like, again, like, you don't learn until you got that feedback, or you just did it. Not even It's not even feedback all the time. It's just like, you just have to practice.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I'm a big follower of that, like 10,000 hours rule. I
Yep.
And so I do think that, like, you need to be doing practice, but you also need to be doing intentional practice. But it
Yes.
doesn't, like I said, watching content or reading content is its own form of learning craft. It's not the same as executing it, but like, you could definitely draw tons from it. But like, I think you do have to get that your butt in the chair, or if you stand and walk while you write, but you got to write, and you got to do it often. And the biggest thing I see is people like just dwelling on, one work, and I'm like, you gotta, what's your next idea?
Yeah.
This is good, but like, what's your next idea? Like, where do we go from here? Because you want to always, you want those creative juices always to be going, right?
Yep.
Sometimes something will strike me and I'll be like, I guess I'm not working on the book I'm supposed to be working on, because I have to write I have to write this outline
Yeah.
right
Yep.
now about this. And if I come and I'll do it, and a couple hours go by and I'm like, that could work. And then I back burner it.
Yep.
Come back later and I'm like, hey, that still speaks to me. Maybe we have something there. When I go through my book ideas, I'm like, these ones, I keep coming back to these few books over this idea over and over. Okay, like now I know, like, it, if it's not in my own mind that's speaking it. The muse is pulling me in. Like, I like Stephen Pressfield. I don't know if you follow him much, but like he always talks about like the muse and like resistance and things like that.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
he does the War of Art. He has a bunch of different books about being a creator, and
Okay.
also he's the guy who wrote Gates of Fire, but he also
Oh my God. Yeah, I was like, why is it sound familiar? Oh my God, thanks for reminding me. I got halfway a third of the way through that, and then my son was born. So I actually have to get back to that. Man, oh man, like
great.
talk about it. Scott Oden actually got me onto that one. Yeah, I was loving that one. I totally forgot about that. I have to go back to that. Yeah, love. Like I said, I was like a third of the way through. I think I was right before spoilers, right? But I was like right before like they had like headed out from like Thermopylae or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah, what a great book. I can't wait to get back to that now.
yeah. That one. I especially if people like the military or any kind of
Yeah,
historical military military historical fiction. Like I always point to that because
yeah,
he just does a fantastic job of like bringing that. First of all, it's good world building, right? He does a lot of
yeah,
research and he fills in
yeah,
the
yeah,
gaps where maybe he doesn't know, but like he does. It's just a fantastic job of bringing you into that like militant kind of society and like
yeah,
that
yeah.
brotherhood and like on all these different levels. So
That was actually
it's been a while
I
since
just
I read it though, so I can't.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if I could answer like specific questions about it. Yeah.
It's so funny that you mentioned that book because I that's actually I always take a paperback with me, right? That's actually the paperback I took with me to the hospital when my son was born,
Hmm.
which is probably why I forgot about it. It's in my bag still,
Oh yeah.
and like stuff was like nuts. But it's so funny, yeah, because that's the one I took with me. Because then I always have like my Kindle on my phone, and I brought my Kindle too. But yeah, that was the paperback that I took with me to the hospital. So that's really funny. Um, yeah, the just well, like you said, you did say like intentional. Um, hours, and like you want to be really intentional of what you're doing, not just random hours. So I'm actually there were just two things I wanted to kind of piggyback on. I'm doing 100 hours because I feel like I went low because it was my birthday this past year in August, end of August, and I was like, I was like starting to write again. I had finished up rough draft for Nathaniel and for prequel novella one, and I was just like feeling like I hadn't done very much because I was pretty much already done before my son was born, with the rough draft, and I was editing at the time, and I was like, I gotta get to writing though. So I set 100 hours for myself, which I thought was low. And like right now, I'm thinking I'm at like almost 40, and now it's about to be a summer, so I'm just gonna like tear through. So I might get to like 150 hours or well over 100, which is kind of low for me still for a year. But with everything I have going on, it's like pretty good. But I also did for like working out. So I set that goal for my birthday, and I was like, no matter what happens, even if I have to do like you know two writing workouts and work out twice a day physically, I was like promised myself I was gonna get those 100 hours because I was re-listening, to like the it was like the 10,000 hours podcast or something like that. And I was like, well, I'm going to set like 100 hours this year, and then next year I'm going to keep going. So actually, even instead of doing 10 years, I'm going to do 10,000 hours. And once I get back to martial arts, I'll be doing the same thing. And instead of focusing on all the other things, I'm just going to focus on those little goals that I'm setting along the way along those 10,000 hours. So if it takes me 1,000 hours to complete the next novella, whatever, but at least I'm, trying to do certain benchmarks. But
Yeah.
yeah, like for me, like, and that's like martial arts too, I think is like what you were saying with intentional, like, and like sometimes you're similar to other people, right? We're all trying to do the same thing, but you and I have different body types, we move in different ways. So even doing the same move, doing it to your body type or your speed or whatever, doing it with however you are meant to do it is really what's best for you. And I consider that with writing too, or just, wanting to get better at anything. But writing in particular, I think, it's like I could try to do what you do, right? Well, I'm trying to draw readers and I'm trying to create great characters. I might try it in a similar fashion that you do, or something. But again, it's going to be different based off of my style and like who I am.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do agree with you. Like it has to be intentionality, and you have to be practicing. And I think anybody can talk to any author, right? And the thing that people hear the most on here is butt in the chair. or
Yeah.
wherever, or on the phone, notepad, like I do when my son's sleeping, but I'm
Yeah.
literally putting in the minutes and putting in the work. You can't ever get to Brandon's level or anywhere near Mike's level or Anna's, right? Before getting your butt in the chair. And like we said, right? Presenting materials to people that you can get feedback. And I like how you mentioned, even if nobody ever reads it, right? Just getting your own feedback on how to get better. So I think those were some great gems in there. So, all right. So, one of my favorite questions to ask people, kind of like picking your favorite child, but which character that you have written so far would you most like to hang out with, and what activity would you pick and why?
So I mean, so this is tough, right? Because I've
It
wrapped
really is.
2 series, and I usually try to write about characters that I like.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I also, but just on a little side note, I really like writing the bad guys,
yeah.
antagonists. They are so much fun, and in many aspects, your protagonist is only as good as the antagonist, right?
Yeah,
They're
look at
only
Batman, right?
they
Yep.
they complement each other. So I really like writing the bad guys, but I don't know if I would want to hang out with them per se.
I'd be kind of afraid, right?
It's tough. Of my current series, it's probably right now like a tie between Cut Nose, because Cut Nose is a partier, so he's a drinker. He knows his way around a tavern. He's a tough guy, but I also Ulf Bodvarsson, like he's that guy. He's almost a little scary. Like you gotta be careful, because I like to think of him as somebody who'd be like he's very protective of his people, but he can also be like incredibly like cruel and violent for like against like enemies or people like outside of his
Yeah, yeah.
unit kind of a thing. So he's kind of got a scary edge to him. And you don't know if I like to think of a warrior poet king kind of, right? Like you don't know
Yeah,
if you're gonna get like a nugget of advice or if he's gonna cut your head off. Like
yeah,
you don't know
yeah.
which guy you're gonna get. But I really enjoy that character, and I don't know. I think maybe I'd like go axe throwing with him or something, just to see if like
Fun.
maybe I could catch him off guard and maybe beat him. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. Then you gotta be careful afterward, right?
yeah. Then you're like throw an axe into you, yeah, and you're like
Yeah,
game
yeah.
over.
See if you can
Yeah,
outrun him.
game over. Yeah,
Yeah. If you read your novella, you probably won't be able to outrun him, right?
yeah.
That's awesome. Well, those are both great answers. I like those. I always like to ask people that because I had a few people, especially like a couple of sci-fi authors I interviewed last year. They're like, "Oh, I'm not quite sure," and I was like, "Oh, I know totally who I would hang out with from your books, and exactly like what we would do." Yeah, so I always think that's fun to kind of think about that. My wife, she's like, "It's just because your character is like always like come to life and like talk to you and stuff. And
Yeah.
I always think of it because that was like a writing practice that Robert E. Howard used to do, and he used to like sit and listen to Conan tell him stories, and people would. I love the story about it. Is like a couple of his friends read letters from his autobiography or his biography, sorry. And they would say like they would come out to his farm and they would literally like see him just like looking off into the distance like he's listening to somebody, and that's why they also say that the books are out of order because Conan was just telling him different stories like you do with friends. Hey, this one time I did this thing. So I always used it as a writing practice. So I like to ask that type of question because sometimes people don't think of it that way. And I think that, I don't know, a teacher gave it to me years ago and I always found it really helpful. But
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And when I write, I tend to I don't know if other writers are like this or not, but I tend to like see it like a movie in my
oh,
head,
totally.
and like the
Yep.
characters of the dialogue are like you know is happening in my mind, kind of like it's like a scene in
Yeah.
a movie, right? I can kind of just see it or feel it, and that's kind of how a lot of scenes go. I'm like, okay, like I throw people into a scene, and I'm like, what's going to happen? I'm a plotter, but I guess that people call them, the plotter and pantser, but then there's the people in the middle, which is a plancer, which is you
Yeah.
plot.
Yeah.
And I guess most people probably fall into that anyway, but I do like to do quite a bit of outlining and plotting before I jump in, because, and this is the only reason why I prefer plotting over pantsing, is that it removes writer's block, because I can look at my
Yeah,
outline and be like, okay, this is where we're going. I may not know exactly how we'll get there, but like these are the key points. These are the pivot points. And sometimes those change when you write the story. That's
totally.
okay too. But I knew the direction we were headed, and I know what the ending, what battle might be in there, or which showdowns need to happen, and which turns or betrayals. Like if you kind of have those ideas in there, you always can kind of work towards it, and it
Yeah,
removes that writer's block. And then you can be, like I was saying earlier, more intentional with your time. You're like, okay, I know I'm writing down, even just writing like a short scene description for me, like so and so has got to get to here or something, right? And like
yeah,
just okay, like what happens between here and there, and just go. And if I don't like that, sometimes I'll skip scenes or chapters too. I'll work on it out of order a little bit.
yeah, yeah,
I'm sure most people do that, but I got to kind of speak to what you feel at the time.
yeah,
And if you're like, hey man, I'm not feeling this guy, I can't write this dude. Like he's not here today.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Uh,
usually can come back later and be like, okay, now I can just focus on this guy's 6 chapters, and I
yeah,
can
yeah.
just get into his head and his mindset and his backstory and give him, what he needs.
No, I agree. That's where I'm also like I like to go between like to have two projects at one time just so I can like right now I'm just waiting for edits. So I'm like working on my like fantasy. And it's just fun because it's a break, right, from urban fantasy. But I'm still thinking and plotting and once I kind of feel situated with what's going on with book one, novella one, then I'll feel like I'll feel settled to be able to, like to change these things for outline for novella two. But yeah, I do outline more than I used to, and I agree with you because there's sometimes like my first fantasy book that I'm still gonna go over a few drafts. I did that. I went out of order because I had to in order to finish, just to finish a rough draft or anything. And that helped me write a couple of different books now. So yeah, but I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't outline more and if I hadn't to practice outlining. And now I'm getting better at outlining where I have like several I think I have like 5 dark fantasies fully outlined. That's
Mm,
what I did for NaNoWriMo. I couldn't write everything with my son, but I wrote 3,000 to 4,000 word outlines
mm,
that I feel are pretty tight that I can go back to and like you were saying, right, kind of do both. So, and I'm still a discovery writer, so but it allows me, I go through those 2 points. It's like I can get to my house various ways through town, right?
right.
But I have to either go one of the 2 or 3 routes, right? But I can choose, and I can choose if I stop or whatever. But I'm always coming home or going to work or wherever. So I think that's a great way to put it. But yeah, it's
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah,
All right, so I want to make sure you got enough time for this last one here, especially with your book coming out. So do you have any news, updates, or current projects that you can share with us?
sure. So Bridge of Kings is out, but that's actually, you can get that for free. The ebook you can get for free. If you like the paperback, I put that up for sale as well. If people want the paperback, it's obviously a very small book. I don't, but it's a lot of fun. I think people like that. So that's the prequel novella. My Oaths of Blood is the first book in the Oaths of Blood saga. That comes out May 7th, which I think will be a few days from when this podcast goes.
Yep,
And
2 days. Yep.
yeah, so that's the first one, and then we haven't set dates for the second and third books yet in the series, but I'm assuming by the end of summer, books 2 and 3 will be out.
Oh, cool.
So the whole trilogy will be available, and so like people won't have you don't have to wait too long. Everyone, you can binge it pretty quick here. So I think people will enjoy that, and each one actually is longer than the last one. So yeah, so this is kind of a big year. I'll have 4 pieces of work that come out,
That's a lot.
including
Yeah.
novella, and but again, it's not that I wrote those all this year or even
Yeah,
last
yeah,
year.
yeah.
It's never you sometimes you see people coming out with a bunch of stuff and you're like, man, how long were you sitting on all this? Like, because like that's a lot of work to come out with all at once. So
Yeah.
yeah, but it's just so happens that we're gonna launch them, all this summer. So
Oh, that's cool. Well, that's good for me because by then I'll be done with my arcs and I can just binge. I'm a binge
yep.
reader normally, so I'm trying to stick to my arcs, but yeah, I'm like ready to binge read on my summer reading list as I told James. So you guys are on that. So I'll probably get to you actually a little bit sooner because I had yours before. No Heart for a Thief on there. But yeah, I just want to remind everybody, to make sure that you're going to the description, checking out all of your social links, book links. Definitely Bridget King's my review. Actually, I'll be done with that pretty soon. Actually, hopefully, I'll be done before this comes out. I can actually put it in there as well, so you guys can take a look and see what I had to say. Bridget King's was awesome. I loved it. I would have been in completed one sitting, but my son said no that night, so I finished the next night when he was too tired to
Yeah,
argue.
I feel you.
Yeah, it was
There's
awesome.
always an
Uh,
interruption.
yeah, I'm really excited for book one. But yeah, just want to make sure everybody's reviewing, all of your products, whether it's novella, any of your earlier stuff too. And yeah, just trying to help out authors any way we can. If there's anything I can do in the meantime before this comes out or after, just Facebook message me, email me, send me everything. Actually, put it in the group, in the podcast group at any time. But send me anything, and I will share it on all of our channels. Once I get your review, I will send it to you, and there'll
Thank
be
you.
like I said, video and blog format, and we'll get Bridget Kings and everything else out there that we can to help you. And I look forward to reading the rest of your work. Of course, now I got to go back and buy a bunch more of your books and get to book 5 and figure out what the Knights of the Golden Circle are doing. But that's okay. That's why I do this. So that's awesome. But thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it and your flexibility. And I really look, forward to Oaths of Blood. So
Well, I really appreciate you having me on, and I
anytime.
felt like we had an awesome conversation. It was fun to hang out and talk books and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and I will be in contact shortly with you, my friend.
Great. You as well.
See you later. Thanks.
I will see you.